Is weird, odd, strange, or just plain bizarre is really your cup of tea? Then, the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast will give you that fix. Can't believe it? Well, listen for yourself as we deliver the strangest news you definitely won't find on CNN or Fox. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Weird News Podcast.
Thank you for tuning in to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Brittany Lawrence. As always, I have rummaged the weirdest parts of the internet to compile the weirdest and most interesting stories of people and events happening around the world. We're going to kick off today in Japan. As most delightfully weird things do, we'll meet a famous robot who is making a very large entrance, and learn about a weird policy put in place at Japan's amusement parks to hopefully stop the spread of COVID. Also, we'll look at a recent poll with some surprising results regarding humanity's addiction to all things fast food, and relive some of our worst college memories through a failed test brought on by simply eating lunch. If you stick around till the end of the show, we'll count down the top 10 panic purchases made since the outbreak of COVID. Spoiler alert, none of it is toilet paper. Our first story today is about a massive robot. We're talking literally massive. It reminded me of a time when my eldest daughter was a bit younger, around 3 years old. She loved robots, the idea of robots, at least. She had some robot building toys, knew songs about robots, would pretend to be a robot and do robot dancing. So when our local children's museum was having a robot exhibit, I thought she would love it. I took the kiddos, and as luck would have it, one of the employees who was remote controlling a robot greeter saw and zeroed in on my daughter. I was so excited. I made her turn around to look at the amazing robot that was coming towards her to talk to her. She took one look and screamed bloody murder and ran away, and I had to chase her down. So we learned a powerful lesson that day, that kids sometimes only like things in theory. Beginning in January, Japan began working on the towering Gundam robot, who recently took his first steps. The Gundam robot is a popular fictional robot that has appeared in over 50 TV shows and movies beginning in 1979, including video games and manga. Japan just really, really loves robots. The Gundam series includes the bipedal humanoid-like robots controlled by a human who rides inside of them. The most recent robot build stands around 60 feet tall and will live in Tokyo for a full year. The COVID pandemic has slowed progress on the build, but according to a recent YouTube video, he is finally on the road to completion. The posted video includes workers servicing the giant from a crane as Gundam picks up and puts down his leg in one gigantic, impressive step. It's a pretty strange watch as the robot is still missing its head, so he might be pretty dangerous if left to his own devices at this point. Upon completion, the robot will be able to fully walk and weigh in at around 25 tons. That sounds like a lot, but apparently weight was a huge concern for the engineers, and that is very lightweight, all considering. From fingertip to wrist alone, the length would be about 6.5 feet and could weigh as much as 1,300 pounds. The fact that they were able to limit the weight was due to careful engineering and design work by the engineers employed on the project. Jun Narita, head of design, explains that special considerations about the types of material and motors had been taken into account, and that this weight restriction was like a curse. Gundam Factory Yokohama has updated its website, canceling the preview event, which was supposed to take place later this month, but has been canceled due to COVID concerns. The current hope is for the robot to be open to the public viewing by October. But thanks to the internet, everyone can get a glimpse of the real-life Gundam taking his first steps. I'll post a link upon the completion of the show. We're going to stick around a bit in Tokyo and head to the Fuji-Q Highland Amusement Park. I personally am a huge fan of roller coasters and the adrenaline rush that comes with the experience. But the Fuji-Q Highland has a very strange request for its riders. Patrons are being asked to please scream inside your heart and not out loud. I feel like this is a whole 2020 mood, and as a mom, I have pretty much perfected this as an art form. Child opens the door in his underwear because clothes seem to be inherently offensive to him in front of an Amazon delivery driver because you couldn't get to the door in time. Yeah, screaming inside my heart is something I am intimately acclimated to. Though some would argue that it is nearly impossible to quietly ride a roller coaster, a hilarious video posted by Fuji-Q proves otherwise. The video stars two very stone-faced executives wearing suits riding the Fujiyama roller coaster, the park's main attraction. Completely silent. At one point, one of the men silently fixes his hair, which has been blown askew on the ride. It's really a wonderful way to spend about 4 minutes of your life. The no screaming guideline is one of several recommendations that Japanese amusement park operators released in late May as the country was beginning to reopen after shutting down due to the coronavirus, according to the Agence France-Presse. According to the guidelines, riders have been asked to give the rides the silent treatment to avoid spreading droplets of the virus. Several park goers have complained that the request was unrealistic, according to a report from the Wall Street Journal. One visitor at Tokyo Disneyland told the Journal that he thought it was too strict. I'm going to be honest. Even aside from how difficult it would be to ride a roller coaster silently, if I were to go to a completely silent amusement park, I think it would make me feel even more like I was living through a zombie apocalypse, even more so than an impending doom virus already does. The biggest concern for attendance is that it seems rather a silly ask, considering that Japan has had a relatively slow spread of the virus as it is. Japan has seen just over 20,000 confirmed cases, and recorded 982 deaths due to the virus. Whereas the United States, which for the moment stands as the epicenter of the coronavirus crisis, who, for the record, is also welcoming amusement park customers, has had more than 3 million confirmed cases and 132,000 deaths. No screen ban has been announced. I did drive by the local Six Flags the other day and saw a roller coaster moving. There only seemed to be a handful of people riding. I'm not sure if that's because people just aren't going to amusement parks around here, or if they have some social distancing rules in place. Though the water park, which is right next door, was doing very well for itself, and had people pushed together like sardines in the lines. I mean, I'm in Texas, so I suppose if you were going to risk your health, you would probably do it at a place where you could at least beat the excruciating heat. For us, the heat mixed with the quarantine blues has forced a lot of family alone time. Sometimes we may get a bit snippy at each other, it happens, but overall we have come through this pretty well connected and strong. However, if my husband, after running out for some sort of errand, came home with French fries on his breath and no order in hand for me, I might be telling a different story. Evidently, I am not alone. We don't do very much fast food around here anymore. Unfortunately, I made a commitment to actually cook more during this quarantine, a commitment I have very begrudgingly have been sticking to. With that being said, I have a well-known weakness for McDonald's fries. Anytime we drive by a McDonald's, there always seems to be a line of cars around the building, so I don't think I am alone here. On a scale of relationship misfires, I'm not sure if I would put my husband getting McDonald's without me on par with stepping out on me, but I'm not really sure. Neither has happened, and I don't know where I would fall on the emotional scale. According to a recent European poll of 1,000 fast food fans, 1 in 20 are desperate for a taste of McDonald's after months of going without and would break up with their other half if they went for a sneaky drive-thru alone. Some really interesting facts came out about our society and our dependence on fast food. Essentially, 17% of people claim that their first taste of a Big Mac after lockdown was better than a pay raise. I mean, I like French fries as much as the next guy, but I feel like quarantine has sent some of our priorities a bit wonky. Even worse, 16% of loyal McDonald's fans even rated the feeling as being on par with the birth of their first child, and 13% considered it to be better than their wedding day. I have to believe that this is just the lack of carbs talking, because I honestly can't compare my salt addiction to the birth of my child. On the upside, this whole pole business is starting to make me feel like quarantine hasn't destroyed my brain as much as I initially thought. My kids, so far, are worth a bit more than a $6 combo meal. Some of the larger percentages were things such as a morning sausage and egg McMuffin on the way to work, which was missed by 22% of people, followed closely by family trips to the drive-thru and weekend stops while out shopping, both at 21%. One of the more surprising numbers for me was that 46% of those polled claimed they would rather give up alcohol than their favorite fast food joint. The only thing I have missed this much since this all began is actual people. You can keep your French fries. I'll take some hugs and genuine face-to-face conversation. That's something I could really go for. And in some, I'm genuinely surprised this hasn't happened to me news, a University of Georgia junior has been given a second chance to take an exam after a rogue meatball caused her to fail a test. Sam Lee was taking an online exam for her economics class while simultaneously eating a meatball sub. Things were seemingly moving along nicely until a meatball trying to avoid its digestive fate fell out of the sub, dropped onto her keyboard, effectively exiting and ending the exam before she was finished. It hit some sort of escape button and closed the entire browser, she recently told BuzzFeed News. Lee said she was initially more worried about her sandwich and computer, that either one of them would be ruined, but when she realized the whole exam was actually gone, she really began to panic. She then set to work crafting an email to explain to her professor what had happened. The letter purportedly took her 6 hours to write, which I get it. As a person who finds herself daily writing and rewriting even the simplest of emails and texts to make sure that my point is being explained and my tone is correct, from punctuation to ellipses to smileys, it's a whole process. Lee posted a screenshot of the message on Twitter. The student recounts the story to her professor of a meatball that had tragically fallen onto my keyboard as I was taking the exam. Tragic indeed. It's almost Shakespearean. This said meatball caused some malfunctions with my laptop and caused the test to submit itself, the email continues. According to a photo of the test results, the student received a 39.17% on the meatball-ended exam. Though Lee concedes a falling meatball is no excuse for the failing grade on this exam, she does eventually ask her professor if she could retake the test. The professor responded in kind and did extend the deadline until midnight for her to retake the test, but did ask that she forego eating anything the second time around. Though many college students are faced with the difficult decision on whether to actually go back to school in person or to attend the fall semester virtually, the common consensus is that students are eager to get back in the classroom. However, returning students are also anxious about in-person learning and what safety measures will be in place this fall. Most of the colleges and universities that are planning to reopen in the fall have said they will still offer remote classes as an option for students who feel more comfortable with distance learning. At least for those students who decide to go back to in-person classes, they can all feel secure that they can fail legitimately by their own accord and not because of villainous sandwiches. When we come back from the break, we will keep the Weird podcast necessarily weird as we explore in multiple stories what not to do when committing a crime and most ineffective way to run from authorities, and learn how best to avoid assault charges regarding neglect of basic household duties, and end with a new and fluffy way to detect the coronavirus.
Check out the show built around the women of MMA. From the UFC to the extreme cage fighting, we got the fights covered.
Listen.
It's the Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast. The latest news of upcoming fights, discussions of previous matches. Join us as we talk to and about the biggest names in women's mixed martial arts, past, present, and future. When it's the women's fight game, you know where to listen to. The Golden State Media Concepts Women's MMA Podcast.
Welcome back. Before the break, we explored the near realization of a Japanese dream of an actual Gundam robot and discovered that riding a roller coaster silently may help curb the spread of coronavirus, but also is kind of creepy. Found out just how many people prioritize Big Macs over most other parts of their lives, and it's a disturbingly large part of the population. And determined that meatball subs were not the best choice for a mid-exam snack. And if you hang out till the end of the show, we'll count down the top 10 weirdest coronavirus panic purchases. Mine was mostly a disturbingly large amount of craft supplies, because if you were wondering how many crafts I have done with my children since March, the answer is all of them. Our first stop during this segment is Noida, India, where a couple would-be criminals initially succeeded with their crime, but then proceeded to fail miserably at every decision they made following. The two men, on a bike, were trying to escape after robbing a man. This part confused me. Apparently, towards the end of the article, we find out it was a motorcycle and not an actual pedal bike, though I prefer the visual of a situation where one ne'er-do-well was stuck on the handlebars. The accused were escaping after robbing the mobile phone and wallet of a man who was out for dinner at gunpoint. There was some cash, driver's license, and an ATM card in the wallet of the victim. After going to some distance, the robbers returned to the victim to ask for the PIN code of his ATM card and then escaped again, Central Noida Deputy Commissioner of Police Harish Chander said. If you missed the most important part of that quotation, it was that the criminals realized once they got a bit of a distance away that they couldn't actually use the debit card because they didn't have the PIN. So they went back to the victim to ask him for it. They came back. Obviously, the event was reported immediately, and the men were quickly stopped at a security check-in in the area. When asked to stop for checking, they opened fire on the police team and sped away. They were chased by the policemen, and the two got injured in retaliatory firing, after which they were caught and taken to a nearby hospital for treatment, DCP Chandler said. I love how he said they sped away, because as I was reading this, I was still under the impression they were on a bike. And I was really confused as to how fast two men on a Huffy could really be. So, to recap, they successfully stole the belongings, check. They came back to the scene of the crime to ask for the PIN number for an ATM card. Not so good. No word on if they said please. Got caught by the police, still not good. Decided to run from police and eventually engaged in a gunfight. All in all, not a very well thought out plan. The two men were identified as Gaurav Singh and Sadanand, 25-year-old locals. According to police, all of the items that were stolen were returned, including the wallet with the ATM card, unused. In the realm of backwards criminals, Florida man did not disappoint last week. For unknown reasons, Florida man was blocking the path of a truck attempting to leave an Orlando gas station by performing multiple cartwheels in the middle of the road. He continued his dramatic routine as he gestured a sign of the cross over his body and lay down on the asphalt. The final moment, the man excitedly throws his white baseball cap across the parking lot toward the truck. Despite the laughter of the crowd that had gathered, his acts of athleticism were not appreciated by everyone, and the cops were soon called and he was quickly apprehended. However, he was able to break free and led police on a short but hysterical foot chase. I suppose in whatever state of mind he found himself in, he figured confusion was his best means of escape. It didn't work, and the 40-year-old was charged with battery on a law enforcement officer and resisting arrest, according to WOFL-TV. For what it's worth, he can be heard in the video from the event apologizing to arresting officers with a sincere, "I'm sorry, I apologize." It's not actually the first time Florida man has cartwheeled through a police encounter. In February of 2018, a man who was stopped for suspicion of DUI in southwest Florida tried to do a cartwheel for cops during a field sobriety test. Cape Coral police said 30-year-old Christopher Budzinski placed an order in a McDonald's drive-thru and then proceeded to pass out behind the wheel of his pickup truck. Upon police approach, Budzinski informed them he had been drinking Chardonnay, a lot of Chardonnay. In the body cam footage, you can hear Budzinski asking police to take me to jail, I beg of you. He can also be heard saying, I deserve to go to jail. The responding officers asked him to do a field sobriety test, which at this point I feel was probably a little unnecessary. Budzinski asked if he could at least eat some more of his fries beforehand, since he knew he would fail the test. A man after my own heart. He then bet the cops he could do a backflip right now and attempted a cartwheel, type acrobatic maneuver, which ended with him falling in the parking lot. It's no surprise that he failed the sobriety test, and cops found a chilled bottle of Chardonnay in his car when they searched it. For what it's worth, at least Budzinski gets more honest as he gets more intoxicated. I feel that's usually the other way around. This was his third arrest in as many years, which led authorities to question him, "Why do you keep on drinking and driving, bud? You could hurt someone." In an act that surprised no one involved, he fell asleep on the way to jail. It's not only Floridians, however, that resolved to impress authorities with their aerobics prowess. In September of 2019 in Abilene, Texas, a man was under investigation by the police for drunk driving after a woman called him in while he was driving his vehicle forward and back, over and over, striking other vehicles. When police asked him to complete a field sobriety test, he tried to convince him that he couldn't possibly be drunk if he could do a cartwheel. It must not have been very good, as he was eventually charged with public intoxication. And in equally fun cartwheel news, and because any chance I get to incorporate some baseball news, I'll take it. Indians shortstop Francisco Lindor hit a home run at a first-pitch fastball off a fellow teammate Mike Clevenger during a team-against-same-team preseason bout of COVID weirdness. The relevant part of the story, however, is how he ran the bases. As he got to home plate, he executed a somersault cartwheel, got back up, and headed back to the dugout. Clevenger wasn't mad about it. "I told Lindor in center field before the game, the only hittable fastball you'll ever see from me is going to be the first pitch of the at-bat." He told the media via video conference. Only someone like Frankie can do that. It's magical. I mean, he told me he was going to hit it if I threw it, and he did. My hat's off to him. He's special. I'm always down for anyone having that much fun playing baseball. I'm glad it's back. In Maryland recently, an argument that was neither fun or involving any amount of baseball unfortunately escalated over changing a light bulb, and it turned into assault charges for one Keedysville woman on Wednesday after allegedly assaulting her neighbor with a knife. 24-year-old Kelsey Barba was charged with first and second-degree assault and reckless endangerment, according to the charging document filed by the Washington County Sheriff's Office. Authorities went to the apartment house after receiving a report of a disturbance involving a knife. After arriving, the 41-year-old victim recounted the argument she had with the assailant and her mother over changing a light bulb on her porch. The victim was apparently upset because the light bulb had not been changed as promised by Barba's mother. The porches to the victim's apartment and Barba's are connected by an exterior stairway. The injured party had approached and confronted Barba about the broken light bulb, and the situation quickly devolved, at which point Barba displayed a taser in one hand and a sharp object in the other. I feel like the escalation here was pretty intense, and at that point a physical altercation began as the victim pulled Barba to the ground and subsequently had her leg slashed by the knife. How long had this light bulb been out where it became this much of an issue? Was the lady bumping her head on the door frame or something because she couldn't see? Why was this the kind of issue that led to physical assault? It also seems like one of those things where you probably knew the mindset of the person you were approaching beforehand. You knew where this was going. Barba told authorities that her mother was an agent for the apartment where the assault took place and was in charge of taking care of the light bulb, and they had already told their neighbor it would be fixed that day. That obviously didn't happen, and things got ugly. Barba originally tried to justify her actions by saying that the neighbor in question had attacked her first, and she only used her taser in self-defense. She also denied having a knife, though, which turned out to very much not be the case, so her legitimacy was already in question. The victim's story was also corroborated by another neighbor, so things are definitely not looking good for the Barbas family. And since we're on the subject of light bulb crime, around the same time last year in Graham County, Arizona, 35-year-old Jerry Morris, who is a frequent flyer in the Graham County court system, was again arrested after only being out of jail near a month. Cops received a complaint of assault at the residence of Morris's brother. Upon arriving, the victim was found to be the brother's girlfriend. She told the officers that Morris was buttering crackers in the kitchen when he accused her of spying on him and threw a large halogen-type light bulb at her, which broke next to her bare feet. There didn't seem to be any injuries despite the fragments hitting her. Morris admitted to the argument and the light bulb hurling, but pleaded that he didn't actually throw it at her. Regardless, he was still arrested and booked and charged with assault, criminal damage, and disorderly conduct. I suppose when you get arrested as much as that guy, you just kind of have to take him in. He's got a permanent seat at the table, so to speak. And in less anger and more fluff-driven news, according to researchers, after just a few days of training, dogs in Germany proved capable of identifying people infected with COVID-19, which is amazing. It did, however, bring back some bad memories of COVID testing and our family. Recently, my oldest had to have surgery due to a club foot relapse. We were informed just a few days before the surgery that we may have had exposure to the virus due to my youngest daughter's in-home therapy. We were devastated and kind of at a loss of what to do. Enter rapid testing. We were told to call and make an appointment, and we were given directions to the clinic. I made an appointment for 9:30 in the morning and took all the kids, even though it was only our oldest getting tested, as I thought it would be a quick process and my husband was working on a big project. Long story short, when we arrived, they had apparently let everyone make the same appointment, and the line was miles long. 3 hours and 3 crying and hungry children later, we made it to the front of the line where we were told she tested negative. We were grateful, but I was convinced there had to be a better way. Turns out, I was right. Not only would a good cuddle sesh with a puppy be much less rage-inducing, I assume it would be quicker as well. The virus-sniffing dogs were part of a study by a veterinary university in Germany, and it was found they were able to sniff out the coronavirus with stunning accuracy. According to the pilot study published Thursday in BMC Infectious Diseases by the University Veterinary Medicine Hanover, 8 dogs from Germany's armed forces trained for just 5 days before they could identify the virus in humans. They sniffed the saliva of more than 1,000 people, both healthy and infected, identifying the coronavirus with a 94% success rate. When we were getting my oldest tested, the nurse that gave me the results informed me that the rapid test was only 80% accurate, so it looks like the dogs have it. We think this works because metabolic processes in the body of a diseased patient is completely changed, and we think that the dogs are able to detect a specific smell of the metabolic changes that occur in those patients. Professor Dr. Marin said in a YouTube video on the study Thursday, "A dog's sense of smell is 1,000 times better than humans, and they really seem to be the right guys for the job at this point." Dr. Holger Volk, another professor from the university, said, "We have known for a very long time that dogs have been used in a lot of walks of life, but for medical detection, it's novel at the end of the day. People have not really realized the potential a dog could have to detect diseased from non-diseased patients. I do. I realize it. Let's get the pup viral sniffing unit up and running. I know I would feel a lot safer with the vigilance of a dog as the head of the viral detection division." The dogs were trained using saliva from both people who had tested positive for COVID-19 and those who tested negative and had no history of respiratory disease. They were surprised at how quickly the dogs were trained to tell the difference. The hope is to use the brilliant canines in public areas such as airports, sporting events, and borders to help prevent further outbreaks of the virus. At the very least, this should form a solid foundation for future testing with dogs and their use in the medical field. Dr. Marin said the next step will be to train the dogs to differentiate between coronavirus and other diseases, such as influenza. That would be quite important to be able to differentiate that in the future, she said. When we come back, we'll meet a cat who takes the long way home via a long-haul trucker. Scientists who may have taken their job a little too far. Unpack some mystery seeds from China, and hear how a 1992 handshake cost a man $11 million.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America's Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America's Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. In our last batch of weird news, we learned what not to do if we want to be successful in a life of crime, one of which is no cartwheels. That light bulbs can make some people very angry, and that dogs once again trump people in most things good. And if you hang out till the end of the show, I'll be counting down the top 10 weirdest panic purchases from Amazon. We're going to stay on the happy animal story vibe for a bit, because I always need a bit of that in my life, and I suspect most of you do as well. Recently, a very lucky cat from Canada took an unexpected trip across the border. Spooky's owner, Shilese Marchand, said she had let Spooky the cat outside along with her 2 other cats Wednesday night. I just kind of assumed that in the morning they would all 3 come running the way they normally do, she said. And my other 2 cats did, but Spooky did not. When Spooky did not return, the family began to be very concerned. She posted on social media that the cat was missing, but no one in the Red Rivers, Saskatchewan community of about 1,000 had seen a black cat wandering around. However, later that evening, the family received a phone call from Spooky's veterinarian, and she said, "Shilese, this is Christine Hill here. I have Jack Shao. He's a trucker. He's in the U.S. right now, but he has your cat." Despite that sounding like an ominous ransom call, it was actually good news. According to CBC News, sometime during the night, Spooky had managed to crawl into the engine bay of the blue Peterbilt semi. Luckily, he found a safe spot to sit while the truck traveled about 790 kilometers, nearly 500 miles, first to Tioga, North Dakota, then to Cromer, Manitoba, then back to North Dakota. Shao stopped to do a routine check of the truck at the Robinson Lake gas plant when he saw some eyes staring at him. "I was scared," Shao said. "At that time it was dark. His eyes were really bright. I thought, what is that? It kind of scared me, and I was afraid to see anything hurt. I thought, he's hurt because there's not much room underneath the hood." He enlisted the help of a fellow trucker, and they were able to retrieve Spooky, who was miraculously unharmed. Shao immediately called the number on the cat's collar, which was the number for Spooky's vet. After he connected with Marchand, he made his new friend as comfortable as possible and gave him some water, as the feline had made a long and dangerous journey. I'm sure he was more than a bit parched. Luckily, Shao was coming back through Red Rivers the next day, and they made plans to meet at the border for the exchange. Marchand is an artist, and as a thank you, gave Shao one of her paintings, of a truck, which is absolutely adorable, y'all. Though Spooky was very hungry and thirsty when he got home, he was no worse for wear, and the Marchand family are forever grateful for Shao's big heart. "I'm just so grateful that Jack found him and not somebody that would just throw him on the side of the road and keep going," Allie Urschel, Marchand's daughter, said. "I'm really happy that he jumped onto that truck." Me too, because I live for happy endings. I'm honestly not sure if this next story has a happy ending or not. Just a weird one, which is all we can really ask for here, I guess. The headline itself got me. I couldn't resist. Scientists accidentally create new species of fish. Because as my podcasts have well documented, I'm pretty sure scientists don't actually know what they're doing. Science is basically one big Yahtzee game where the dice are genomes and fart theory. So, anyway, scientists in Hungary accidentally mixed up some Russian sturgeon and American paddlefish and created a fish that has yet to be named. The plan was simple, and honestly, when I read it, seemed like it maybe wasn't well thought out. I mean, I'm not a scientist, but when trying to get an endangered Russian sturgeon who happens to be the source of some of the finest caviar in the world to reproduce asexually, your best bet is probably not to use the sperm of a different fish in the hopes that the DNA streams wouldn't cross. It's like they had never even seen Ghostbusters. The sturgeon isn't so genetically different from the paddlefish, and they belong to the same group. And according to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, sturgeon and paddlefish both provide tasty caviar. But the two fish would never meet naturally, and they have completely different habits and physical characteristics. The American paddlefish dwells in the Mississippi River basin, and the Russian sturgeon inhabits Russian rivers. The Russian sturgeon is considered extremely valuable for its roe, or eggs. Both species are threatened by shrinking habitats and overfishing. Scientists were hoping to get the sturgeon to begin asexual reproduction by using a process called gynogenesis, a process that involves using the treated sperm of another species to coax the specimen's eggs to develop. But in gynogenesis, the DNA of the sperm specimen isn't supposed to transfer to the offspring. In the end, scientists ended up creating two different hybrid fish breeds. One of them is 1 part paddlefish, 2 part sturgeon, and the other is 1 part paddlefish, 4 part sturgeon. The how and why are still open questions, said lead author Janol Kalduv, an aquaculture researcher at Hungary's National Agricultural Research and Innovation Center's Research Institute for Fisheries and Aquaculture. That's one of the longest names I've ever said. The two likely hybridized because the sturgeon was slow to evolve. This means there are likely fewer differences between its morphology and genes and those of other species, including apparently the American paddlefish. The mix-up could actually have some positive impacts on the planet, though, so there is definitely a silver lining here. Sturgeon hybrids are typically used in aquaculture and provide around 20% of global caviar production, the researchers said. But if the hybrids adopt the paddlefish parents' habits and learn to feed on plankton and other microscopic organisms instead of the more discerning sturgeon's diet of crustaceans and larger fare, they may play an important role in adapting pond aquaculture to the challenges of climate change. In layman's terms, if these sturtlefish, which is the working name for the unnamed fish at the moment, end up not needing to be fed and instead can rely on natural plankton in their habitats, the carbon emissions that would have resulted from feeding them will shrink, which is obviously a good thing. Paired with their high market value as caviar producers, their mistake could be a fairly profitable one. As for the original intent to save the endangered sturgeon, the study has taken us closer to our aims, Caldy said. Next, we head to Utah, where some other unknowns have become a maybe problem. We're not real sure. I actually saw some people posting about this on my own Facebook. It sounded scammy, so I looked it up. I mean, it's true, but not necessarily not scammy. We don't really know what's going on. Newsweek reported that a number of Utah residents have had peculiar packages delivered in their mailboxes. A small parcel filled with seeds and Chinese writing on the outside. I opened them up and they were seeds, said Utah resident Lori Cully, who found her package on Tuesday with Chinese characters, plus a label stating there were earrings inside. Obviously, they're not jewelry, she said to Fox 13. She thought it may have been a case of mistaken delivery, but when she posted about it on social media, she quickly found out that at least 40 local residents had received similar packages in the past few weeks. Utah has strict regulations on which plants and seeds can both be imported and sold in Utah to avoid any invasive species. Since the seeds were delivered, a representative from the Utah Department of Agriculture picked up Cully's seeds to have them tested. Newsweek reported the department may also get assistance from Customs and Border Protection agents to investigate the mysterious seeds. I mean, at this point it sounds like it could be literally everything or nothing. And if something, why Utah? It's like the most inoffensive state in the whole country. Cully said this is not the first time people have been mailed unidentified seeds. She researched online and found people in the UK had been sent something similar. There was an article that I found in the UK saying this has been happening over there, and they are bad seeds. They are invasive, Cully said. I hope that it's nothing too serious. Don't throw them in the garbage. Don't plant them. Don't touch them. I mean, okay, I don't know if I would call any seeds bad. I mean, a seed is a seed. Unless you're growing a murder-death plant, I feel like, in general, a seed is fairly innocuous. The Utah resident, who now goes a bit more conspiratorial, said the seeds may be something more illicit. I mean, there's even a possibility it could be a drug or something, Cully said. It just smells. It doesn't sound right. Better Business Bureau's Jane Rupp has another theory. She thinks it could simply be a scam relating to customer reviews, in which companies post low-cost items so they can write fake reviews for their business in a resident's name. Oddly enough, I just heard about this scam recently on Facebook as well, when a friend of mine started getting random packages of small items she never ordered. The world is crazy, and according to Rep, this is rather random. I don't think I've heard of seeds before, Rep said to Fox 13. The first thing to do is Google your address and see what's out there. Numerous things will come up when you Google your address. It's kind of scary sometimes. I have to admit, I don't really understand this comment. What exactly should I find when I Google my address? Because all I see are old realtor listings and some weird site called diedinahouse.com, which I honestly have no desire to delve further into, but you do you. Bottom line is, we don't know what the seeds are. They could be murder death plants though, so your best bet is to give them to someone who can dispose of or replant them properly. We're going to end the weird news segment of the show today with some feel-good story of luck, promises, and bro friendship. Basically a Lifetime movie. Wisconsin friends Thomas Cook and Joseph Feeney made a handshake deal in 1992 and promised one another that if one of them ever won the Powerball jackpot, they would split the lottery winnings with the other. Seems like one of those pipe dreams, never gonna happen type things. And an appropriate time for a baseball reference. I'm a huge Rangers fan, and in 2011, a local flooring company put out an ad stating that if then baseball star Josh Hamilton hit a grand slam in the next game, everyone who purchased flooring in the past month would get it free. I remember watching the game, not really thinking much about it, as Josh Hamilton, though a home run machine, had only hit 2 in his career thus far and had not hit one since 2008. Yet, in the 4th inning of a game against the Cleveland Indians, he walked up to a bases-loaded situation and sent a bomb into the stands. Despite his fall from grace, that was still one of my favorite moments in personal baseball history. But back to the lottery. Cook purchased a ticket for the recent lottery and didn't think twice about keeping up his end of the bargain after winning the Powerball. He was in shock, showed the ticket to his wife, and then immediately called his friend to inform him they were now both millionaires. Feeney said he thought Cook was joking. The two men would buy lottery tickets every week, but never thought they would actually win, he explained. It happened many years ago, but according to Cook, a handshake's a handshake, man. Which is the purest thing I have heard in a while. The friends chose the cash option of about $16.7 million, according to a Wisconsin lottery press release. Cook and Feeney will each take home roughly $5.7 million after federal and state taxes, which is no small fortune. The money allowed Cook, a grandfather and great-grandfather, to finally retire. Feeney had already retired from the fire department. Neither have any huge, extravagant plans for the money, except to use it to spend more time with their families and to travel. We can pursue what we feel comfortable with, Cook said in the interview. I can't think of a better way to retire. Me neither. And I honestly just loved the pure, wholesome nature of this whole thing. Go ahead and do whatever, Cook and Feeney. You deserve it. We've worked our way through the most recent weird news. Thanks for tagging along. When we come back from break, we'll count down the top 10 weirdest panic Amazon purchases since COVID hit. It's not toilet paper, but they are weird.
The GSMC Life and Happiness podcast takes you on a journey of exploration. We'll discuss tried and true methods alongside the latest trends of how to best live your life to its fullest and happiest. From psychology to meditation, science to self-help books, the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast will help you to discover what makes you happy and how you can live life being the best you possible. Download the GSMC Life and Happiness podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back. In our last segment, we went from a cat with a serious drive for adventure, an unnamed Franken-fish that may actually be useful, but no less insane, weird, maybe murder seeds, but probably literally nothing, to the purest bro promise ever made. It's been a ride. Now we'll count down the top 10 crazy COVID-19 purchases as compiled by Listverse. If I wasn't an Amazon junkie before, I am even more nauseatingly so since quarantine began around here. It's like my little moment of joy when I get that 10 stops away notification. My most recent purchase was rainbow-lensed heart glasses, so you know where my head's at. So let's dive in. Number 10. Elastic. At the beginning of the quarantine, there was a lot of controversy about face masks. Celebrities were donning N95 masks while healthcare providers were going without. Medical experts advised others against wearing face masks, but later recommended that all frontline workers and shoppers wear them. As such, basic face masks were hard to come by. So people got creative. How to make your own face mask videos and tips flooded social media. Masks were crafted from bandanas, scarves, t-shirts, socks, and bra cups. Most of the DIY masks required elastic to function effectively. The shortage continued and folks stepped up to make masks not just for themselves but for those in need as well. A call for volunteers from Joann stores has thus far collected more than 114 million masks for America. Singer donated sewing machines to fashion designers and hospitals to boost mask supplies for frontline workers. It's no surprise that the elastic continues to hold the top spot on Amazon's bestsellers in arts, crafts, and sewing. Those homemade masks aren't going to stay up on their own. Number 9. Baby wipes. We actually had personal experience with this. Before everything shut down, we were on a family vacation in New Mexico. About halfway through our trip is when things went nutso super cray, and we walked into a Family Dollar to pick up some snacks, and it was a disaster. But the sweet lady at the front counter informed us that if we needed some baby wipes, she could procure them for us, as she was hiding them from people that didn't actually have babies. We didn't actually need them, but we went ahead and bought a pack because we were really confused at this point and wanted to make sure we were prepared. With hand sanitizer and Clorox wipes so difficult to come by, consumers were turning to baby wipes to keep the virus at bay. Currently, more than half of Amazon's best-selling baby products are wipes. This is a new dynamic as sales of disposable baby products had been slowing thanks to declining birth rates. Perhaps several weeks in quarantine will result in an uptick of new babies in about 9 months or so. It is worth noting that most baby wipes will not guard against the coronavirus. In order for a sanitizing wipe to protect from germs, bacteria, and viruses, it must contain 70% isopropyl alcohol. Consumers may be better served by keeping paper towels in a coffee can filled with a bleach solution. Number 8. Yeast. SSA & Company, a global management consultant, estimates that, thanks to the lockdown, between 35 and 40% of consumers are eating home-cooked meals for the first time. I can also confirm this, as I have been cooking more in the past 5 months than I ever have in my life. I'm over it. Sales of baking products increased during the second half of March. Surprisingly, baking yeast sales increased by 647%, more than any other consumer packaged goods product, and spiral ham spiked by 622% over the same time in the previous year, boosted in part by the approaching Easter holiday. Amazon's grocery and gourmet sales during the first week in April were 77% higher than they were just 2 months earlier. The Walmart grocery app surpassed Amazon by 20% and reached an all-time high. As of April 5th, average daily Walmart grocery downloads were up 460% over January. Number 7. Kitchen scales. Interestingly, food scales have ranked high on the list of bestsellers. As more people are cooking at home, they're discovering equipment and utensils that make the job easier. All-in-one Instant Pots, air fryers, and waffle makers have also been in demand, up 7% from the previous April. Other non-essential kitchen helpers include rice cookers, vacuum sealers, and soda makers. I have both an Instant Pot and a foodie. Can confirm, 10 out of 10, best gift and investment of my life. For those of us non-natural chefs in the world, get you one or both. You know what? Just get both. You'll thank me later. Number 6, portable ice makers. Consumers continue to purchase fresh meals and produce from grocery stores and home delivery services, but they're also seeking out items that have a longer shelf life. Sales of frozen and shelf-stable fruit, for example, grew nearly 5 times the rate of fresh fruit in the first 3 months of 2020. Chest freezers were the top-selling appliances on Amazon during the first month of quarantine. This is a response to the initial concerns that supermarkets would run out of food, especially meat. The freezers can also be used to safely store the increasing amounts of food that are now being prepared at home. A vacuum sealer is a great add-on to a freezer. Now that the freezers are in place, portable ice maker machines are dominating the appliances category. Consumers can't get out to the bars, and they're wary of drive-through iced coffees and convenience store fountain drinks, so they are opting to make their own refreshing beverages at home. Number 5. Eyebrow razors. I will admit I had no idea this was a thing. It sounds dubious and like I should never have one because I would most certainly end up with no eyebrows at all. Because more people are staying home, overall sales of beauty products along with apparel have gone down about 50% year over year. But remote workers want to be presentable for Zoom meetings. So, as salons and barbershops were shuttered, consumers sought out products that would enable them to groom their own hair. Sales of hair clippers increased 166%, and hair color rose 23%. People are starting to need a haircut, Macmillan said in April. You see more beard trimmers and hair color and things like that. It's interesting to watch the dynamic play out. Women's eyebrow razors are currently among Amazon's top 5 beauty and personal care category, as salon waxing and tweezing services are suspended. Sales of men's nose and ear hair trimmers peaked and are now on the decline. Number 4. Ping pong paddles. As a youth director for the better part of a decade, I have played my fair share of ping pong. Also, I am terrible at it, so this was not something I found myself clamoring to get during pandemic family time, but not so for a lot of people. After urgently addressing their personal protection, food, and grooming needs, consumers looked for ways to fill the hours being spent at home. Puzzles, which were actually trending before COVID, colored pencils, and games, have been in high demand. Purchased for at-home use, as well as to send Grandma and Grandpa to encourage them to stay put. Weirdly, ping pong paddles stand out, as sales are up 89%. As the weather warms, outdoor gems like bubbles, wading pools, and sidewalk chalk are flying off Amazon shelves. Exercise apparel and equipment are also on the rise. Even bird-watching items, seed, feeders, were up 91% as of early April. Number 3. Tailbone relief cushions. I actually already had one of these. If you are a woman who has given birth, you probably already do as well. Don't ask. You either know or you don't. Babies are hard. As of late March, about 16 million U.S. workers began working remotely, converting kitchen islands and dining room tables into home offices. Months later, that number is likely much higher. These telecommuters are burning through personal supplies of copy paper and printer ink and turning to Amazon, Walmart, Staples, and other office supply stores for reams of paper, boxes of envelopes, and packages of high-yield ink cartridges, packaging tape, Sharpies, and tailbone pain relief cushions round out the top 10. Number 2. Sticks, switches, and dots. For anyone stuck at home, there's the comfort of home entertainment. Gaming, streaming, and binge-watching help to fill the days, but are frustrating, if not impossible, without the right equipment. Boy Genius Report rounded up the top-selling electronics among its readers, because everyone is looking for new toys to play with while sheltering in place. The site found that AirPods are hugely popular, even more so now that they're selling at the lowest prices ever. But their popularity pales in comparison to Amazon's real top sellers. Could that mean that families are removing their earbuds in favor of communicating with their own family? Streaming media players, or streaming sticks, are hands down the best-selling electronic. They topped the charts at the start of the lockdown and remain the solid frontrunner. The Roku streaming stick and the Amazon Fire TV Stick 4K can each be had for under $50. The Nintendo Switch Lite, which was temporarily off the bestseller list only because it was out of stock, is the best of the handheld gaming devices. It can be had now in just about any color, but mostly in pre-owned condition. The Echo Dot is like having another person in the house, one of Amazon's best-selling devices of all time. It helps users do just about anything with a mere voice command. Check the weather or top news stories, request favorite songs, set thermostats and oven timers, buy multiple dots and talk to the rest of the family who are hiding out in their own rooms during lockdown. Because with or without earbuds, everybody's still doing their own thing. And number 1, poop bags. Can also confirm that my neighborhood has become a veritable pets on parade on the daily. Many animal lovers never adopt because they're not at home enough to adequately care for their pets, but quarantines and lockdowns make it possible to bring in a furry friend. The American Society for the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals in Los Angeles saw a 70% increase in animals going into foster care. New York City pet shelters experienced a sudden rush of adoptions and fosters. Muddy Paws Rescue and Best Friends Animal Society reported that the shelters they work with were nearly out of cats and dogs. Applications were up tenfold by the end of March. For the moment, we definitely don't have any dogs left to match with foster volunteers, said Muddy Paws marketing director Anna Lai, which is a great problem to have. And while the stock market suffered, shares of Chewy and PetMed Express soared. Both were up 7% by the end of the first quarter. Chewy, with a home delivery model that is tailor-made for a lockdown, saw a 35% increase in sales, and pet supplies, food, litter are more or less recession-proof. Meanwhile, over at Amazon, pet nail clippers, flea medicine, fur trimmers, and poop bags topped the bestsellers list. Sales leveled off in April as consumers used up their panic purchase stockpiles, but they remain solid. Let's just hope that quarantine foster parents hang on to their newfound pets after the economy gets back up and running again. And that's it. Thanks for hanging out and getting weird with me. And as always, thank you for listening to the GSMC Weird News Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I would like to ask that you please remember to subscribe to the show and write a nice review. That really helps us. Also, if you can, please follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. Thank you, and have a good night. Be good to each other.